Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode. What's up, all my Slick Talkers? This episode is brought to you by my friends at Hostfully. Now, these are the days where enough is enough with managing multiple calendars for your properties in order just to make sure you don't get double booked. And not having a website for your guests to get to know your story and book direct? You can stop stressing, at least a little bit, and check out my friends at Hostfully. Hostfully was created by hosts for hosts, and they understand the importance of centralizing operations, inboxes, calendars, and of course, keeping up with the times and the industry data. You can go to hostfully.com, use my code SlickTalk20 to get access to their digital guidebooks and their property management software. I use them as well, and I love the simplicity of their product. Now, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now sit back and enjoy.
And that's one of my favorite questions. You asked that earlier about like trends throughout the years. I always love seeing how people answer this question. And specifically, we ask it in a fun way. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to, what's a pain point that you'd like to solve within your operations? And the number one answer is technology. That can mean many things: guest communications, automation, centralization, guest vetting, integrations, calendar management, reporting. So that's a big umbrella. So that it makes sense that it's the number one answer. And this is what Fred was talking about earlier, being able to look multiple levels deeper into that.
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, everybody. Welcome back to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And we got the man, myth, and legend, David Jacoby, dancing along to the intro music. And then we have the marketing manager, Fred, over at Hostfully, joining us today to go over some awesome industry reports. But good afternoon, I think. Yeah, it's afternoon. So how are you guys doing today?
All right, Will, thank you very much for having us. And I gotta admit, Fred is also really the man, the myth, the legend as well.
I believe it. I believe it. I got to see and experience the man, myth, and legends on Hostfully team in person in San Antonio. So I definitely know that statement is true. Fred, you gonna show off some of your incredible dance moves today, or is that for a future date?
I think David took all the dance moves for today.
But you've got the moves calling.
I got the moves calling, and I got the beard. I'll stick with the beard.
It's a good fit. It's a good fit. Well, I'm excited for this episode. Obviously, hey, there we go. Slick Talk mug for the left-handed people. I love it. If anyone's listening to the audio version, we are streaming online as well, so you can see the visual side. But long story short, we've had David on the podcast, I would say 2 times. Maybe this is the 3rd time, I think.
It's hard to keep track these days.
I know. You're so popular. I don't know how to keep track of you, but it's been a while since you've actually been on the show, and recently in end of 2021, you guys published your industry report, which always gets a lot of buzz and good feedback. So we're going to dive into some data and numbers today. And if anyone who hasn't listened to David's episode and heard the founding of of Hostfully, then obviously you need to go back, and I'll link it back in the show notes. But anyways, I want to jump right in because there's a lot to cover. And Fred, you took on a big chunk of this report, if not all of it. So maybe let's have you introduce yourself really quick, give us some background on how you joined the team, and then we'll go into the report.
Thanks, Will. So I'm Fred, the marketing manager at Hostfully. Although Will often calls me the marketing guy at Hostfully, which is fine. I guess it works too.
That works.
Started working with Hostfully about 2.5 years ago, just writing articles with them for the SEO, for the blog. And then one thing led to another and joined the marketing team. And now I handle all sorts of different marketing initiatives, the giant industry paper being one of the big ones. This is the 5th year that we push out this paper, that we prepare this paper, and it's getting bigger and better every year. And we're really excited to launch it this year. We've done a few things differently, so I hope people that get the chance to read it will appreciate some of the little differences we put in there. So yeah, really excited to talk about this today.
Awesome. Let's name what's a couple big difference for this report compared to the year before.
So this year we looked at it a bit differently, and we said, hey, why don't we have experts comment in the report itself instead of just at the end? So we gave the opportunity to founders and really experts in the industry, people like you. You're in the report too, Will. So, I mean, like, that's a tap on the back to you too.
Hey,
so experts were able to comment where they felt most comfortable. So the information that they were able to share is very on topic and very to the point, and a lot of this is very actionable as well. So that was one of the big differences. And then, of course, we had our big section about COVID. It's unavoidable. Yeah. But I think a lot of people at this point are willing to skip that section. And yeah, just more questions. And we put a bit more effort to look at different variables and compare them with each other. Instead of just looking at one stat, we looked at, okay, what does this stat mean with the other stats, or like numbers, and how does that play together? So we're able to draw a couple more conclusions than we normally do. So very interesting report, and lots of insights and strategies that hosts and managers can use going forward into 2022.
Awesome. And David, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say the report now, as Fred mentioned, it's 5 years old, and it's evolved in a way as Hostfully has evolved. So Hostfully started off just doing digital guidebooks, and now we're a full-scale property management software as well. And when we started off doing guidebooks, we wanted data on how property managers are communicating with guests and providing recommendations and providing information about the home. And there wasn't much data out there. So we decided to create the data itself. So we put out a survey questionnaire that really focused on guest communications and digital guidebooks and just the guest experience. Do you upsell certain things? And that was the focus the first kind of year or two, with a couple other general questions to get to know a little more about the property manager. Mm-hmm. And we've added a bunch of sections over the years to just really focus about all areas of operations for a property manager. What are their biggest challenges? What's gotten easier? Where are they getting reservations from? And now the past few years, a lot of the questions have remained the same. So we've been able to do some cool comparison from one year to the next.
Well, I'm kind of curious, and I obviously don't think you guys have the answer right now, but over the last 5 years, what the biggest trends and shifts were within that 5-year time period. It would be kind of interesting to see, what stayed the same and what really obviously got escalated probably because of COVID. But I just have a quick question for both of you, actually. What was your favorite segment in the report to either create or to discover? And I'll let anyone go first.
Well, there's a few. Number one was the rebound section, where we looked at income change for hosts and property managers. And we asked the question, how has your income changed last year over the course of this year? And then we were able to look at the effect of the pandemic and the rebound that we saw in 2021. And if you want, we can spend more time talking about that later on. And then we spent a bit of time looking at upsells this year. And David has a lot to say about upsells, but upsells is like one of those strategies that we all want to. Every year, every host or property manager says, look, I want to implement this. It's a good growth strategy. I'm going to make some extra income or create a new income stream for my properties.
Yeah.
And then we found, comparing data over the years, that it seems no one really implements this strategy because it's complicated, right? Other than early check-in, late checkout, or like mid-stay cleaning, it's not something that you can just throw technology at and automate. So it's not surprising that it gets lower in the priorities, especially like when spring break hits and then it's all hands on deck.
Yeah.
So now you're running, you're struggling to just keep up, and then all of a sudden, well, I'm going to deal with upsells as well. Maybe not so much. So that was an interesting insight, and it's one of those differences, like what we talked about earlier in the podcast when you said, what's the difference this year? We looked at a bunch of data from the years before. Now that we have 5 years to look at, and we found this trend, and we might be able to share some tips on how to get that accomplished for hosts and managers. So that'd be a good thing, I think, if the industry moved towards upsells. So
100%. Yeah. And that was the section that I commented on, was that
that's right. It is too.
Upsells, but I get it. Like, it's really hard. It's a great idea, and it's great to talk about. And we do a weekly stand up for our side of the management side. And we talk about, how do we do these experiences? It's not just heads and beds anymore, right? We want to get more than ADR. We want to be more dependable on revenue outside of occupancy, even though in-stay experience or upsell does require occupancy. But how are you able to capture that guest longer without, obviously let them walk out the door without, anything extra? So it's hard. It's not an easy task to accomplish. I would be curious and would love to see hosts or managers that are doing it really well, though. Have really good, reliable staff that have really good, reliable products and partners in the area, that they just have a great system that makes it seem automated without all the headache and hustle and bustle. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
It's mostly larger property managers that have that staff to be able to handle this side of things. Maybe they have a whole concierge team, or they just have a team that's managing a different software to handle this. The overarching theme is that property managers are not able to do a lot of upselling through their traditional property management software. So pretty much everyone says there's at least one thing they'd like to sell that they either don't do it, or they figured out some way to hack it outside of their property management software. So now you're getting intensive of having to have multiple softwares, using a whole separate tour and activity software, or are you just going to resell other tours that other people are offering, and how are you going to integrate that? So maybe early check-in and late checkout, you're seeing that get integrated more with property management software, or with smart lock companies, or cleaning turnover management companies to handle that one piece. But outside of that, if you want to do groceries pre-arrival, or if there's some other local tours that you offer, or a mid-stay cleaning, or different things like that, it's just hard.
It would be I'm gonna derail a little bit, but do you guys have a lot of people using the guidebooks marketplace feature for this upsell experience, or are they really relying on companies like Breezeway, who do a great job on seeing, hey, there's a gap night, let's do an extended stay, let's see if we can get a mid-stay clean, whatever their offering could be? Are you guys seeing a lot of use in the guidebook?
Yes. Yeah, we are seeing more and more use of that. There admittedly are some limitations when you want to do some more kind of complex upselling, or if you want to resell and work with other tour and activity providers. But as a basic standalone mid-stay cleaning, early check-in, late checkout, you are starting to see some tools for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that's a good sign, and I'm pretty sure as 2022 moves forward, I know we'll be seeing a lot of exciting updates from Hostfully either way, because you guys are always adding new things. I expressed to you guys in San Antonio, I was super excited when I woke up and my inbox was unified with all platforms. Awesome. And my Verbo guests were getting their check-in instruction without me having to do a thing. Nice. I literally woke up and it was so good. So again, you guys are just doing good stuff. So I know we'll see more. But let's jump into this report. I took a couple screenshots. So anyone listening, you need to hop onto the video side. Definitely check it out. If not, I'll link in the show notes a downloadable uh, link, basically, yeah, for the guidebook, or not the guidebook. Gosh, we got so many things going on. Yeah, the study. So let's go ahead and jump into, I guess, the overall market overview, and I'll show a quick screen grab here for our audience, and then Fred or David, if you guys want to jump in going into this section. Sorry, David, you're going to be covered up this time instead of Fred.
Nice.
But go ahead and jump into wherever part you guys want to grab.
Sure. I'll go first on that, and basically that's showing there's more competition than the year before. So that's kind of to be expected that you're seeing more competition. There are also some places though where you're seeing less competition. So in previous years before the pandemic, 2019 and earlier, basically no one said there was less competition.
Yeah.
But both in 2020 and 2021, a bunch of folks, around 20% or so, said there actually was less competition than the year before. So last year it's 16%. So you're kind of seeing this dichotomy, this split. In some places there's a lot more competition. In other places it's been really tough, and there's been less competition. Yeah. But in the places that there's more competition, there's also more revenue. So people who reported having more competition also reported an average increase in income of 32%. So more competition isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it makes me think of McDonald's and Burger King, where Burger King's original strategy when they were looking at places to have a franchise, to have a location, basically they just decided wherever there's a McDonald's. Oh, okay, that's our demographic. So we're just going to find wherever there's McDonald's, we're going to have a Burger King. So you're seeing that a little bit.
Interesting. And do you think the less competition sector is because businesses that went out during COVID, or is it just because they got more inventory, so they were no longer a competitor in the market? What are your overall findings on that side?
We didn't dig deep into location, but I suspect location is a big part of it, with urban versus traditional vacation rental destinations. So like here in the Bay Area, there's Tahoe and there's wine country. So in Tahoe and in wine country, there's been a big increase in competition. But in San Francisco, an urban market itself, it's been less so.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Makes more sense now. Okay, what was the next part? I got the report pulled up on my end too. So changes in competition levels were kind of a big shift. And I think I have that graphed here. Nope. Growth strategies. I didn't upload directly as the report is. So either way, we'll figure it out. But there is a change in competition levels graph going into revenue changes from the previous year. So are people seeing a lot of revenue changes in the sense of that they're just increasing pricing overall across the board due to the high demand after the whole lockdown situation in the beginning of COVID, where it was months on end, where it was like, do we leave? Do we not leave? Do we do a staycation? Do we not do a staycation? Is it that just that pent up demand of increase, or what else were you guys finding in that graph?
Yeah, so I'll go first, Fred. You can add if you want. You did actually flash that growth strategies chart as well, and that is a big part of it. So there were increase in dynamic pricing and playing around with rates was a big part of your folks' growth strategies over the past couple of years. But a big change between this past year, between 2021 and 2020, was growing their portfolio. And that we're seeing that as a trend when we ask people what they plan to do next year. So like when the pandemic first hit, people didn't care about their portfolio. They were just putting out fires about growing their portfolio. They were just putting out fires, dealing with the existing properties that they had. And there was actually a really big focus on marketing in 2020. And across the board, in a few different places, marketing was less of a focus in 2021. So it's kind of like in 2020, they had some downtime. What am I going to do? I'm going to start marketing to new audiences, right? To local folks, to first responders, people within driving distance. And then they kind of figured that out in 2020 and stopped focusing on that in 2021 and started focusing on growing their portfolio. And that's going to be a trend for this year, for 2022. A lot of people are saying they're going to focus on getting more properties on board.
Interesting. And I guess for companies like Vintory, that would be a great trend to have continuing
Yes.
to go, because inventory from a property manager perspective is not easy when it's like coming up with the strategies and finding all the outreaches. And it's great when your current owners or friends and family, everybody else is recommending you and they're just signing up naturally. But the for companies like Vintory, this is probably where they're going to start to shine a lot more, and it'd be interesting to see what type of new properties come online this year. Just a random thought, just because we see their content all the time. But anyways, so growth in portfolio. Fred, do you have anything extra to comment on?
Well, all the strategies David was talking about, increasing your rates, adding more properties to your portfolio, we saw a big impact on revenue and on income change for property managers. So we have this chart that we prepared last year where we asked people, did you lose any money? Like, what was your revenue change over the year? And so last year, not surprising, or 2020, sorry, not surprising with all the cancellations and like the lockdowns, most people lost money. Like that was where the majority of answers was. And then this year, it's like almost like a mirror image. It's like people that lost 50% revenue, now that category is flipped to plus 50% revenue. So we looked at it and we divided it in revenue change. But like the big stat here is 84% reported a positive revenue change in 2021. There you go. That's the chart.
Perfect.
And it's almost like a mirror image, like I said, to 2020. And that's really encouraging. And the remaining 16%, we can speculate on that. But what David and I talk about, and when we look at some of the individual answers we got, like looking at locations is always a little complicated.
Yeah.
But we think that the urban markets are probably going to get that boost as well this year in 2022. Now that business travel is reopening, people are more comfortable going back to cities. So we're hoping that remaining 16% is going to get swept up in the positive revenue change for next year. So we're going to keep an eye on that for next year's survey for sure.
Awesome. And go ahead.
And as a comparison from 2020, just putting numbers there, not only 84% of respondents reported an increase in revenue, but in 2020, only 39% reported an increase in revenue. So, as much as in 2020, people were saying later in the year, oh, things are better, we're rebounding. At the end of the day, people still had a tough year in 2020. So it is good to see that rebound for most. Well, it's also a little sad and concerning that 16% did even worse in 2021 than they did in 2020.
Which is interesting. It makes me, what was going on operationally, maybe behind the scenes, that could have been refund issues, could have been, all sorts of other things that go into it.
We also saw scale having an effect on growth and revenue. So the big property managers, like the 50 plus properties, more likely to report a significant income change. So 30%, 40%, 50% or more than the smaller operators. But also, like with that huge potential for an upswing, you get more risks involved, right? More overhead, different, like it's just a whole different ballgame. Mm-hmm. So if you were to report a loss, it would also be more significant if you were a large portfolio manager.
Yeah.
So very interesting to compare large versus small and see that, the big players, when things go really well, it's fantastic. But then when it goes sideways, it can derail a bit quicker.
Yeah, it sounds like it could hurt a lot worse. Thankfully, we're not at that level where it hurts really, really bad when that stuff happens. But there was a section that did catch my attention. I feel like we could really geek out throughout this whole report. It was technology. So obviously, vacation rental software, tech. What are some of the big trends and changes happening? Are they good? Are they dangerous? What are they? I'm just kind of curious from your guys' perspective. As a software company, it kind of makes sense.
Sure. And that's one of my favorite questions. You asked that earlier about like kind of trends throughout the years. I always love seeing how people answer this question. And specifically, we ask it in a fun way. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like what's a pain point that you'd like to solve within your operations? And the number one answer is technology. But that can mean many things: guest communications, automation, centralization, guest vetting, integrations, calendar management, reporting. So that's a big umbrella. So that it makes sense that it's the number one answer. So and this is what Fred was talking about earlier, being able to kind of look multiple levels deeper into that. If you split it between larger property managers and smaller property managers, there's a big difference there. For larger property managers who said technology, a lot of it was around guest communications.
Okay.
Which kind of makes sense because they have lots of guests they're dealing with, and traditionally larger property managers are on multiple platforms as well. So dealing with answering questions from guests coming from different places and maybe using different methods of communication, whether it's email or WhatsApp or SMS. And for smaller property managers, it was really more around automation and centralization. So a lot of these property managers don't have a property management software or have a very lightweight property management software. And they're actually talking about their most valuable software is the OTA itself, is Airbnb, or like Google Suites or Microsoft Office is what they're giving as responses.
Wow.
So they have different issues and different needs within technology. A couple other things to note: cleaning was number two after technology, which isn't too big a surprise these days. But what was especially interesting within that was cleaning in 2020 was high up, but it was specifically around implementing cleaning systems, right? So putting in a software like Breezeway or Turnover BNB or Properly, and making sure that the cleaners are doing the new COVID policies of, sanitizing this area and that area and stuff like that. But in 2021, it was less about that, and it was more about staffing. And there is a real staffing shortage, and that applies to cleaning. So we give some kind of like pick list questions, as well as some free form areas where people can give their comments. And a couple comments related to cleaning that I'd like to read was hiring cleaners. The good ones are booked, and our turnover has been high in the last 6 months. And another said, get hold of a competent cleaning team that does not break the bank. And another one said, find a reliable and competent house cleaning company. It has been almost impossible in our rural area.
Yeah, that's statements I agree with very much so. At least in those markets that are really, there's for us, that we were based out of Seattle. So like Seattle, really easy to find some cleaners. Actually, there's a lot of cleaning companies. There's great contractors out there. But Camino Island, which is like an hour and a half more north, not so much. It's a very retired community. It's a very there's one motel that has 8 or 9 rooms in it. It's not even a motel. It's more of like a really rundown inn. I can say this because I grew up there. But the vacation rental market is very underserved when it comes to just the turnover, because a lot of the hosts do it themselves. They're mom and pop, people that have a business on the side, or that they're just doing it because they love to host their friends and figured when their friends aren't staying, they'll host strangers in their home or their second bedroom or a wing of their house or whatever it may be. So it's very, very true on the cleaning side, at least in markets like that, unfortunately. But
sure,
very interesting.
Fred, is there anything else on the technology side or on challenges in general you want to comment on?
I mean, we're tech providers, so this is going to sound like we're just promoting our own our own product. But some interesting insights when you look at, again, like revenue change and software adoption. So if we look at people that reported significant earnings increases in earnings, they typically tend to use more software, whether that be PMP, cleaning turnover apps, dynamic pricing, name them all, like automated insurance screening. So generally what we find is people that use, like I said, more will have an easier time showing the revenue gain. And then, this is the part where Hostfully is really happy to see this. People that use a property management software had a huge increase in odds of getting 50% or more income change. So it was like 35% responded huge income change. And the non-PMP users or the non-platform users were 13%. So it just goes to show like the power of centralization and automation and what you can do when you're, streamlining and reducing your overhead and just having a proper communication flow with your guests. And also the power of integrating all these different software together, which is like the role of that central software.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's not a big surprise, but generally the larger property managers will have more software. But I think that's actually a good thing to learn from, especially for the smaller operators. Like if you have 10 properties, it's always good to look at what someone who's managing 100 is doing, because they're not necessarily just hiring more staff. Like that's never their solution. It's how do we automate? How do we streamline? How do we simplify things? So if you look at it from a position of a smaller operator, you can look at what the bigger ones are doing and say, okay, that's one of the tactics they use is implementing more software in their stack.
Yeah.
So that's something like a key takeaway that managers can implement. So.
Well, as a tech company, I guess I just want to ask this question towards you guys. With all this data and all these responses coming in, what does that do for you as a platform? Because you already have, like I said, you guys are focused on getting your unified inbox. Your integrations are actually, from what I've seen, experienced myself, and have also seen that you guys actually received awards for with integration partners like Airbnb and Vrbo. You're the preferred PMP in order to integrate with. So what does this do for you guys? What does this drive and push when it comes to development and growth in the tech itself?
Yeah, so some of it is validation of what we're already doing and continuing to make sure we're doing that well. So not just having strong integrations with the channels, but we're also seeing a big increase in folks wanting direct bookings and being able to empower property managers to have a platform to get direct bookings. Also having a strong integration zone, kind of, an app store, so to speak, and really continuing on that. That's something we've always prided ourselves on, but a lot of the data here shows how important that is. One question we ask is, what is your favorite software? And there were 28 different property management softwares that people responded with.
Wow.
And coincidentally, outside of that, if they didn't say a property management software and they said another software, just a coincidence, there were 28 other softwares that they mentioned. So that's, what is that, 56 total different software that's important, and being able to bring that all together and integrate with all of them. And it's fun seeing some of the software that they mentioned. So, Zapier and Zoho and Facebook and Canva and Trello, and the ecosystem is just really diverse. So one other thing related to that and the diverse system and what we were just talking about challenges, we also ask what's gotten easier. And well, first of all, a lot of people said nothing last year and this year. But even if they said nothing, they still reported an increase in revenue. So at least, even if it's harder, at least it's paying off.
Exactly.
But other things they've said are like guest communications and pricing and turnover and cleaning, and that's all the same stuff that people said have gotten harder. So like these things are falling in two different buckets. It's gotten easier and it's gotten harder. And what does that mean? To me, the way I see that is just how entrepreneurial the industry is. No one graduates with a degree in vacation rental management from college. Everyone's coming to this industry from different backgrounds, and they all have this entrepreneurial can-do attitude. And basically, when property managers have a problem, they focus on it and they fix it. So for one person, for one property manager, it's marketing or it's guest communications this year, and then they're going to find a software out there. The ecosystem is diverse. There's going to be a solution for them, and then next year they're going to report that it's easier.
For sure. I was going to say, speaking of your integration zone and partners and all these things are getting easier, the interesting one to see on here for me is, okay, I misread it. It was more direct bookings apparently got less easier this year than it did in 2021 or 2020. But you guys actually just integrated with which we're going to give a shameless plug, a shameless shout out to Ellie with Hudson Creative Studio. But, creating this ability to give hosts or managers that brand, that shiny, what is shiny syndrome, or you have a shiny toy syndrome or something, like where you get super excited about a new thing. But anyways, you have that ability now to really push towards that, because you guys do also provide a pre-arrival form for your users to integrate into the trigger and messaging system. And that's such a powerful tool that I don't think a lot of people are realizing. You now have hundreds, if not thousands of emails, and not just the booker, but the guests that come along with them if they fill out that email correctly. Now to really target that marketing and that rebooking strategy when it comes to a direct booking website via integration with you guys and Hudson Creative Studio. So it's going to be interesting to see that number shift. I'm hoping people start going that direction. I know it's a big thing that we just did, and we're really excited with the way it's going. But I know, anyways.
Shout out to Ellie. Shout out to Recreation Stays as well. Your website looks beautiful. So great job on that.
Yeah, no, it's it took a lot of action from Ellie to take our vision and run with it. So we're very thankful, and that you guys integrated, so it made it really easy. So we don't have to jump onto multiple other platforms and do all these things to make it work. It's just nice and easy. So.
Yes, he's done a great job. We're a big fan of Hudson Creative Studio and excited that they are in our integration zone to do a really full heavyweight API integration for beautiful websites. And still, while we're talking about that, one other interesting thing too, in general, there's been the trend of a focus on increase in direct bookings. And we're seeing that a lot more with larger property managers than smaller property managers. So if you were under 50 properties, most of your reservations, around 50%, if not a little more, are coming from Airbnb, and maybe around 15% are coming from Vrbo, and same thing, like 18% are direct booking. So you've got all your eggs in one basket. But as you get bigger, you start to diversify both off of Airbnb as well as onto your own platform. So for over 50 properties, Airbnb and Vrbo reservations were basically the same. People got around 20% of their reservations from Airbnb and from Vrbo. So they're really diversifying off of Airbnb. And 44% were direct bookings. So that's more than double. Less than 50 properties, 18% were direct bookings. More than 50 properties, 44% of their reservations were direct bookings.
What is it with that number of 50? Why am I always seeing 50 properties? Is it just the magic in numbers, or what do you guys think?
It's partly is for the stats purposes, we have to divide into categories. We also look at 50 as a software provider, at least as a major threshold in vacation rental management. That's when 50, at least that's the number we focus on. We see a huge shift where technology becomes more important. Standard operating procedures are critical for operating your business. So we decided the cutoff would be 50. We have to put it somewhere for the categories in our report, but also based on the feedback we get from the industry, that's where something has to shift. Usually the founder has to go into more of a CEO role or a managerial role, can't be involved as much in the day-to-day. So it's that metamorphosis at 50 that we look at and we focus on.
Hey, Emmanuel, what are you doing in this episode? Did I forget a meeting?
Hey, Will. No, we don't have a meeting, but I love tuning into the recording, so I figured I'd hop in.
Oh, awesome. Well, hey, since I got you here, do you mind sharing some stuff about Jetstream? Ever since our episode on Slick Talk, we get tons of questions about you and, of course, Jetstream.
Of course. I'd love to share. Anything specific?
Well, I keep getting asked, what's the difference between Jetstream and any other service or tech in the vacation rental industry? My simple answer is that Jetstream isn't just the tech you need, but it's the people too. Am I close?
The short answer is yes. You see, maybe you're a short-term rental operator or a realtor or an investor. If you have an interest in short-term rentals and hospitality, you're looking for the most efficient way to either enter the industry or streamline your operations. You've got two options. Option one, the hard one. You find a PMS, hire staff, learn the tools, figure out OTA distribution, train yourself, train your teams, price your product, deal with customers, and you do everything yourself. Option two, partner with Jetstream. Jetstream is a complete solution that maximizes your revenue in the short-term rental industry without increasing your fixed costs. Jetstream handles everything.
So I don't need to sign up for vacation rental software or worry about distribution headaches. And what about branding? What if operators love their brand and name? Do they have to give that up in order to be powered by Jetstream?
Absolutely not. Jetstream does all of this white labeled under your brand name. Everything. You focus on delivering on-site guest delight and growing your inventory. Jetstream handles the rest. And to make it even easier for your listeners and anyone else who stumbles across this podcast, anyone who mentions code SlickTalk50 will receive 50% off the first 3 months.
All right, coming in big with the 50% off for our listeners. Well, hey, Emmanuel, I just want to say thank you so much for shedding some light on the power of Jetstream and being such a great industry partner. I do have to get back to this episode, though, but let's get together soon for another virtual happy hour. First round's on me.
Sounds good, Will. See you soon.
Gotcha. That makes more sense. I am curious now to go into the section on guest experience. You guys know I'm a big guest experience fan. So what are the findings in this area, and what is the, I guess, growth or focus for guest experience when it comes to using tech, the increasing revenue, decreasing portfolio, all this stuff? How does that impact the experience?
Well, the guest experience this year, we saw a big change again, probably forced by the pandemic. So where in the past, we still saw, the paper copies of the guidebooks or the house manual left in the property, or people just, responding one-on-one with the guest for recommendations. This year, we saw a huge adoption of digital guidebooks and people reducing the paper copy in the listing. And then people just much more reliance on their property management platform and like the guest communication aspect of that. So throughout the report, people that download it, they'll see guest communication is one of those things that just changed so much in our industry. From an operations perspective, it got more complicated because the guests now expect so much more out of their vacation rental experience. And there's a whole bunch of different reasons why that may have come around. Might have been like pent-up demand for travel. They haven't traveled in a while. They expect like this almost luxury resort sort of experience. Or it might just be people are new to vacation rentals and they expect like a quicker turnaround for communication. So guest communication, big shift, much more reliance on tech tools by hosts and managers of all sizes. And it seems to have a really big impact on the guest experience throughout their journey in your properties. Then another interesting thing we saw was smart devices. So it's not reflected in the software, but later on in the questions, we see that a lot more people implemented smart locks and automated that in their stack. And again, that's big response to the pandemic. So contactless or self-check-in being now like a preferred method by guests for checking in. And just the industry, again, like David said, their hosts and property managers are all high-level like entrepreneurs, so they find a solution. So what do? Can't meet them anymore. All right, we're going to put in the smart locks. Let's go. And like this big shift. And we expected, we didn't see a big shift towards smart locks with the larger operators. We assume that's because they may have already had it in their properties, but to see, the smaller operators like the 1 to 5s or like the 5 to 49 properties, just go ahead with that and like just full steam ahead. Boom, we get it done. Like within a year, done. Next, it's like David was saying, like people are finding challenges and they're just finding solutions to it. So those three things, big shifts in the industry in terms of the guest experience. And we're like, it's amazing to see the industry just respond to something immediately, like almost turn on a dime.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, one thing also related to what you said with the digital guidebooks. So comparing pre-pandemic versus post-pandemic, there was obviously a huge increase in the use of digital guidebooks. So from 2019 to 2020, it went from 24% of property managers using digital guidebooks to 55%. using digital guidebooks. And it stayed about the same, maybe went up a little in 2021. The real big bump was after the pandemic in 2020. And on the flip side, in 2020, 77% still used a hard copy guidebook. And in 2021, that went down to 49%. So the vision I have when looking at this data is that people had all these hard copy guidebooks. The pandemic hit, they implemented a digital guidebook, but still kept that hard copy guidebook there. And then it got all kind of raggedy and beat up. And in 2021, it was finally, so bad they had to get rid of it, and they just didn't replace it.
Yeah, which is good. I have a couple owners on our side that want us to put physical copies in the units, and not a big fan of that, as you guys know, because we love the Hostfully digital guidebooks and they work better than most. Would say the hard copies do, because you can't take a hard copy every time you go to a restaurant or something like that, right? But I'm curious to know from just like the smart lock side of things, did I was say you got a going off there, David? Or it's Fred? No.
Sorry, guys.
I'll answer this one.
Do you think the big hesitancy from getting smart locks was just cost? What took people so long in order to actually go towards the smart lock route? Because for us, that was like first thing, we need to find a good, reliable lock. Because guarantee I'm not getting up and going to meet anybody to check them in at any property. I don't care if it's the perfect, most sunshiny beach in the world. I would not go do it. So I'm just kind of curious on what that hesitancy was.
Yeah, as Fred said, that was specifically for smaller property managers. So they either had more of a high touch environment of greeting people in person, so it wasn't as necessary, or they had old school lock boxes with the key in there, and it just wasn't as important. But with COVID hitting, then they kind of realized it did have a little more of importance. They either couldn't meet people in person, I think that was a big part of it, or they just had some extra time and they realized now is the time to kind of implement that, because it's harder for me to be there in person, just even to check in on things. So knowing when people are coming and going, knowing when the cleaner's coming and going.
Makes sense. It was a curious thought, just why hesitate on that one. But now for distribution and marketing, what was the biggest shift in this? Because obviously we kind of covered Book Direct, Airbnb, Vrbo, all that stuff. But let's say for the 50 under, we'll keep using the 50 mark. What any big changes? I know we've talked about on the podcast multiple times on niche marketing channels. Flarbo is a good example because it's a Florida vacation rental by owner type site, but very niche to that state and demographic of inventory. But I don't know, just kind of any thoughts or insights on the distribution side?
Yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about that already, with the difference between the smaller and the larger ones, and the larger ones getting more direct bookings and having less of their eggs in the Airbnb basket. I'd say in addition to that, we asked what channels do people list on, and there really was a wide variety and a long tail. So people are being opportunistic and getting their properties out there. Marriott is getting more popular with their homes and villas unit. That's making a big jump into it. And I think as corporate travel picks up in 2022 and beyond, Marriott will do even that much better, because the corporate travelers get their points for staying in a hotel for business, and then they want to use it on vacation with their family and stay in a house. So they're really being a leader in that area. We've seen other stuff like Plum Guide was mentioned a bunch, and you're right, there are these niche sites, CHBO corporate housing by owner, Mr. B&B and Fab Stays for the gay community, Go Lightly for the female community, all these niche ones. And of course, it's fun to see budandbreakfast.com up there for the 420 friendly community.
I love it. People are getting very specific with their search and findings. And yeah, speaking of Fab Stays, I can't wait to see them take off. I met Robert at the RMA conference, which was awesome. So it's really cool to see all these kind of come together, and you guys are with Go Lightly directly integrated, which I love. The whole fact that Hostfully doesn't rely on a channel manager to be built underneath. You guys already integrate, which lifesaver for hosts and managers. So awesome. I love it. Awesome. Well, anything else that you guys have as major takeaways? love the detail in the report. Obviously, you got a lot of good people giving feedback. There's Matt Landau. I saw Simon Lehman. I saw a couple, Jill Mason from VR Scheduler, who we had a lot of fun with at VRMA as well. Just a lot of good people throughout the report to mention. But I don't know, just any big takeaways, big highlights, big big things that anyone listening could just really make sure that they capture when they download the report.
Well,
everybody
hopefully we've already covered most of the big takeaways. I just reiterate what I said earlier about this survey really shows how eclectic, diverse, and entrepreneurial the community is. The property managers figuring out solutions for stuff, and the way they talk about what's gotten harder and what's gotten easier and what softwares they're using. It's so diverse, even to like little questions like how do you share information, and you think, oh, digital guidebook, emails, what else is there, and people promoting like the local Facebook page, or having signs and instructions in the house, or QR codes was mentioned a ton. People putting up QR codes as kind of the hybrid solution to not having hard copy stuff, but QR codes all over the kitchen and the living room on how to work different things for different appliances. So it's just fun to see the answers that come in, and how if you've seen the operations of one property manager, you've seen the operations of one property manager.
Yeah, very true. Oh, and this report collects not just Hostfully users, right? This is
everybody. No, it's open to everyone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the cool part, is that it's not just a Hostfully database; it's an industry database.
Absolutely.
In the sense of getting to see the different softwares that are lacking in certain areas or are actually really thriving in a lot, comparatively to what you guys are used to seeing with your users on a day-to-day basis. So that I find really interesting and cool. Fred, anything for you?
Well, a lot of takeaways in this report, and we didn't really mention this, but it's a great way for hosts and managers to validate their operations and look at what other people are doing in the industry based on like an aggregate of answers, and then just look like, am I on the right path, or am I seeing something that's different? And I think a lot of people, once they compare and benchmark to what others are doing, or like it's good to know that some of the strange trends that we're seeing and the evolution being so quick is happening like across the board with everyone else. Yeah. So I think everyone that looks at this report is going to find a different takeaway. It just depends on where you are in your operations and your procedures. Yeah. But one of the takeaways that I found, and it's a lot of CEOs from the cleaning and turnover companies, software providers, it was about retaining the staff for the cleaning staff, and it goes, and I'm not going to like list the whole thing because it's a full page on what to do about that, but it revolves around like automation, and you use automation to save money on overhead, and then you pass that on to your staff, which they're happier because they get paid more, and then taking advantage of the marketplaces that are out there if you can't find a cleaner yourself. So again, like, these are experts in their field commenting on this, and I invite anyone to read the report to see, there's really detailed recommendations in there on what to do for the cleaning staff. So please read.
And on that note, inviting folks to read the report, I'm sure it will be in the show notes, but just to plug hostfully.com/2021 report.
Perfect.
So you remember that, hostfully.com/2021 report. You can go there to download the report. It's free. We'd love to hear your feedback. You can email me personally at david@hostfully.com.
Perfect. I'll give you guys his cell phone number too if you want to text him, call him anytime. Just
why
kidding.
Not?
No, but seriously, all this will be in the show notes. Fred and Brad, the marketing men on the Hostfully team, were able to give me an exclusive Slick Talk link as well, so you guys can see my beautiful face on page 13 and all that good stuff. Long story short, though, we love having you guys on the podcast and getting to go into this data. And
Stop it.
I can only see a portion. So yeah, it's really good stuff. And so I just want to say thank you guys for joining me on the podcast, going into the data and the numbers. And of course, anyone listening, if you didn't get to see our beautiful faces on the live stream, then you definitely need to go check it out so you can see some of the pictures that we showed. Download the report. get nitty gritty with it. And we will see you guys again all next week. Go for it.
And Will, I just wanted to say one quick thing too. I want to say congrats on all your success. It's amazing to see how far Slick Talk has come, as well as Hospitality FM and Recreation Stays. What you're doing for the industry is awesome. We are so proud, Hostfully, to be a very, very small part in your success of being a sponsor. Maybe we were your first sponsor, I'm not sure, and that will always be a badge of honor for us. So thanks for all you do. Thanks for having us on the show, and keep on keeping on, man.
Of course. Well, hey, just to touch on that, you guys have been a big part in all of this. So I just do say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because you guys have been awesome first-time believers in the middle of a pandemic too. It was like the beginning of COVID when I was doing testing sites, that you were a guest on the show, and then you're like, hey, we should sponsor and talk about working together, and that really just means everything. So I owe you guys all the love and support, and thank you guys so much for joining me on this week's episode. And for the Slick Talkers out there, go ahead, check out hostfully.com, use promo code SlickTalk20 if you decide to sign up. No big deal. Download the report, see some cool stuff throughout the way, and we'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week. What's up, everybody? If you've gotten this far into the episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast, then you are amazing, and thank you so much for tuning in. We want to send you two places really quickly. If you can, check out the show notes and click the hospitality.fm link. Check out all of our other shows on the podcast network. And don't forget, if you have someone that you want to hear on the podcast, then fill out the guest fill out form so that way we can get them on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy another episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast.